Issue 2 of Crash came out in March 1984. The cover of this shows King Kong eating a ZX Spectrum, as this issue included an article comparing the different Donkey Kong variants available. In this video, I'll show you the most highly rated games from the issue. It includes perhaps one of the biggest rating travesties in the history of Crash, but we'll get to that later. 3 games were tied for 10th place. The first of these is The Birds and the Bees by Bug-Byte, written by Adrian Sherwin with graphics by Matthew Smith of Manic Miner fame. In this game, you play a bee called Boris, who has to collect nectar whilst avoiding birds, centipedes and other creatures. Crash liked the animation and found the game to be fun to play. They found the bee's inertia confusing initially, but ultimately realistic. They rated this game at 83%. I find this a charming little game. It's colourful, which of course means colour clash, but good fun for a few minutes play now and then. Next we have Krakatoa, written by Paul Reynolds and published by Abex. In this game you control a helicopter and have to rescue people as the nearby volcano of Krakatoa erupts. Although this game was in joint 10th place in terms of ratings, garnering only 83%, Crash gave this one of 5 Game of the Month awards. They praised the level of detail, although criticised the number of controls and the layout of the control keys. Personally, I find that the fiddly controls ruin what could have been a reasonably good game. I'd not played the game before now, and probably won't again. Also in 10th place is The Pyramid. The Pyramid was written by Bob Hamilton and published by Fantasy Software. This is a game in which you have to shoot aliens and collect diamonds in order to unlock the doors in your current room. Each door leads to a different room with a distinct set of aliens. Crash compared the graphics in this to the style produced by Ultimate Play the Game. They found the game addictive, nicely packaged, and good value for money, giving it an 83% overall rating. I first encountered this game on the Soft Aid compilation released in 1985. It was one of the better games on that compilation. Still quite fun to play today, although the gameplay can get a bit samey despite the variety of antagonists. In 9th place we have Alchemist. Alchemist was written by Ian Weatherburn and released by Imagine. A step into the mist-shrouded world of terror and mystery, this is an arcade adventure in which you play, as the title suggests, an alchemist. You explore a castle, avoiding monsters with the mission to find and defeat an evil warlock. To cross platforms, your alchemist can turn into an eagle. Crash found it an original game, praised the graphics and sound, although were split in their opinion of whether it was addictive. They rated this at 85%. Generally a slow-paced game, exploring and mapping the castle can be fun. It's a reasonable game for the period, although not one of the all-time classics. In 8th place we have Fighter Pilot, written by Dave Marshall and published by Digital Integration. In Fighter Pilot, you're piloting an F-15 Eagle fighter jet, a plane that can engage in air-to-air combat against adversaries. Crash described it as definitely the best simulation for the Spectrum yet, and exciting to play. They did note that the responsiveness of the keys was not always brilliant, but gave this an overall rating of 86%. Whilst this game was undoubtedly the cutting edge of simulations at the time, when compared to things like Cyan's original flight simulator, these days it's just fairly bland and featureless. I didn't enjoy this game, and I won't be returning to it. There were 2 games tied for 6th place this month. The first of these is Omega Run, written by Richard Brisbane and released by CRL. In a similar vein to Fighter Pilot, this game puts you in command of a fighter bomber with a mission to find and destroy a nuclear bomb that's due to imminently explode. Crash liked the detailed instructions included in-game and the many configuration options, which add variety. But they noted that like most flight simulators of that time, there is no realistic landscape. Nevertheless, they found the game playable and addictive and rated it at 87%. I found this game to be more exciting than Fighter Pilot, and one of the better flight games available for the Spectrum. Of course it is let down by the featureless landscape, but is fun for a few minutes play. Tied in 6th place is Doomsday Castle. Doomsday Castle is the second game in this issue written by Bob Hamilton and released by Fantasy, being a sequel to The Pyramid, which appeared earlier in this video. This is similar in style to The Pyramid, but set in a castle, and pits you against a number of different types of creatures, each with their own traits. Crash at the time considered this a viable competitor to the Ultimate games. They preferred this over the pyramid, enjoying the complex relationship between the different creatures, although describing it as a long game with impossible odds. It's certainly not quite as good as the games from Ultimate, and I don't find this to have quite the immediate appeal of the pyramid. Worth a quick play, but I'm not sure I'd want to complete it. In 5th place we have Punchy. Punchy was published by Mr. Micro and was inspired by the Punch and Judy shows of British seasides of old. An original game idea, based somewhat on the Hunchback arcade game, this lets you take the role of a policeman called Bobby, who has to rescue Judy whilst Mr. Punch tries to stop him with tomatoes, custard pies and other obstacles. Crash commented on the game's long load time but said it was well worth it. They were also impressed by the speech, which was produced from the Spectrum's beeper with no additional hardware. They gave this 88%. In my opinion, Crash considerably overrated this game. The graphics and sound are garish by today's standards, and there's not a great deal of depth to the gameplay. Not a game I'd recommend. In 4th place is Android 2. Android 2 was written by Costa Panyai and released by Vortex. A follow-up to Android 1, you play an android trapped in a maze who has to destroy 5 militoids. Crash commented on the detail of polish in this game. Even the instructions are beautifully done. They noted that it is sometimes difficult to see landmines, where the floor is obscured by the 3D perspective view. Crash gave this game 90% and another of its Game of the Month awards. Although difficult to begin with, this game feels like the structure of the maze and the movement of the robots could be learnt. I can see why this would have addictive qualities and was certainly one of the best maze-type games available at the time. 2 games were tied for 2nd place. First, we have Scuba Dive, written by Mike Richardson and released by Durrell. As its name suggests, this game brings the pastime of scuba diving to home computers. Crash described this as good as anything you will see in the arcades, praising the movement of the diver and the simplicity of the control keys. Yet another game awarded Game of the Month in this month, its overall rating was 92%. One innovative feature they mentioned was the ability to save the high score table and load it back in later. Quite a cerebral game, allowing you to experience the joy of scuba diving without getting wet. Not a huge deal to it, it mainly comes down to managing the inertia of your diver to avoid fish and the seabed. A game to spend an enjoyable few minutes on. In joint 2nd place, and getting another of the Game of the Month awards, is Atic Atac from Ultimate Play the Game. In this game you choose to be a knight, a wizard or a serf, and have to escape from a castle by collecting 3 parts of a key, whilst avoiding a selection of randomly appearing monsters. Crash praised the graphics and the attention to detail throughout. They said, "Not a true adventure nor just a shoot the baddies game, but it is fantastic." They rated this at 92%. Atic Atac is memorable for the right reasons. Fast-paced and challenging, but not impossibly so. There is additional replay value through the 3 character types, each of whom can use a different type of secret passage. Undoubtedly one of Ultimate's, and indeed the Spectrum's, best games. Microsphere followed up the train game, reviewed in issue 1, with this month's 1st place, Wheelie. In this game you ride a motorbike and are trapped inside Nightmare Park. You control the speed of your motorbike to avoid some obstacles and jump across others, all in an attempt to find and then race against the Ghost Rider. Crash described the game as dangerously addictive and rated this game extremely highly both for its addictive qualities and value for money, giving it 99% in both categories and a final score of 93%, making it the most highly rated game in this issue. Not surprisingly, it was also one of the 5 games awarded Game of the Month. Although the presentation of the game could have been improved, this is certainly very good. An original idea with a good level of challenge whilst not being too difficult to begin with. This is a game I return to even today, although personally I rate Atic Atac more highly. Now we have some games that, although they didn't get into the top 10, are still worthy of mention. A game I remembered playing and was keen to play again is Stonkers, written by John Gibson and released by Imagine. This is a strategy game where you have to move tanks, artillery and infantry across diverse terrain to gain strategic advantage and defeat your computer opponent. Crash liked the presentation and described this as a long game but a deep game. They found it more appealing than many of the other war games available at the time, although only gave it a 78% rating. It's certainly slow moving to start with, but that's the nature of the game. The graphics are colourful, and the game is worth replaying if you're into strategy games. Finally, we come to the biggest travesty in the whole issue, a game that not only did not get Game of the Month, but didn't even appear in the top 10. I'm talking, of course, about Chuckie Egg. This was written by then 16-year-old Nigel Alderton and released by A&F Software. This is a platform game in which you have to collect eggs whilst avoiding chickens, and in later levels, a flying chicken. Crash recognised the responsiveness of the controls and the good bright graphics, but primarily criticised the price, and noted that it is sometimes tricky to get your protagonist to climb or descend ladders until you get the technique right. They gave it the far too low score of 80%. This game was fantastic at the time, and is still great fun today. Nigel Alderton had made a leap forward in the platform game genre, and, for someone so young, that was doubly impressive. Why Crash didn't recognise the brilliance of the game at the time, we won't know, but this is a game I love and will return to frequently. If you have enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to see more videos about retro games from Norlogic Retro.